I saw it myself, the way his hand lingered on her arm, the heat of her skin practically searing his synth flesh. It was a raw, unfiltered moment of connection. She was gasping for air, her lungs burning with the effort of a 10-mile vertical climb, and she just leaned her forehead against his chest plate. I remember the sound of it, a dull, metallic clink followed by the frantic, wet thud of her heart. Xylos didn't move, he just stood there, his sensors probably redlining from the proximity. Truth is, I don't think they even noticed me standing there in the corner of the medical bay. I was just the one recording the data. But what I saw wasn't data. It was something else entirely. But I am getting ahead of myself. I should start where it really began, back in the clinical, cold brightness of the Zenith Conservatory. The argument started months ago. Proctor Krell was in rare form that day, waving his multi-jointed arms around and shouting about biological fragility. He had all these charts, blue and silver holograms flickering in the cool air, showing how easily a soul born could be crushed or poisoned or broken. He called them a liability to the sector. He wanted imperial oversight, which is really just a polite word for a cage. Krell looked at the humans and saw glass. He saw something that needed to be protected because it was too reckless to survive. But he had never actually been to Gaia Prime. He had never felt the vibration of their world or the intensity in their eyes. When Xylos volunteered to go and investigate, I went with him. I figured someone needed to keep the arbitrator's head on straight, and I've always been good at staying out of the way. But the moment we stepped off the shuttle, things got complicated. The smell of the place hits you first. It is not the sterilized, recycled scent of the conservatory. It is ozone and blooming jasmine and the faint metallic tang of industrial exhaust. It is alive in a way that feels almost aggressive. I remember Xylos stopping dead in his tracks. There was this human woman, a scout named Sarah, sitting on a jagged rock right at the edge of a sulfur spring. The fumes were thick enough to melt a standard filter, but she was just sitting there, blowing steam off a mug of liquid that looked like liquid coal. She looked up at Xylos, her eyes bright and dangerously sharp, and she just smiled. It wasn't a soft smile. It was the smile of an apex predator that had decided you weren't worth the calories to hunt. "Hold my infusion and watch this," she said, tossing him the mug before he could even process the request. Xylos caught it, his servos whining as he balanced the boiling cup. Then, without a word, Sarah just launched. She sprinted toward the cliff's edge, her muscles coiling and snapping like high-tension cables. And then she was gone, diving into the abyss for no reason other than the thrill of the fall. I saw Xylos lean over the edge, his optics clicking as they tried to track her. He looked terrified. He thought she was dead. But then we heard it, a long, echoing scream of pure, aggressive optimism. She wasn't dying. She was playing. Truth is, that was the first spark. That was when Xylos realized that the fragile little humans weren't the ones in danger. We were. The climb was what finally broke Xylos's logic. We were at the base of the Fang, the spire of rock that looked like it was trying to puncture the atmosphere. Sarah didn't use a grav lift. She didn't use a suit. She just looked at the vertical wall of stone, wiped the sweat from her eyes, and started moving. I stood there with Xylos, watching her fingers find grips in cracks no wider than a credit chip. I could hear the rhythmic scraping of her nails against the granite and the heavy, rhythmic pull of her breath. It wasn't the sound of someone struggling. It was the sound of a machine that refused to overheat. I remember the way Xylos's optics whirred, zooming in on the micro-tremors in her calves. He was waiting for the failure. He was waiting for the fragility Krell had promised us. But she reached the summit, and when we finally caught up via the shuttle, she was laughing. She was covered in salt and dust. Her skin flushed a deep, vibrant red, and she looked more alive than anything I'd ever seen in the ivory halls of the conservatory. That brings me back to that moment in the bay, the one I can't stop thinking about. After the descent, her body finally started to pay the price for that kind of madness. She was shivering, a biological reaction to the adrenaline dump, and Xylos, this cold, calculating arbitrator, did something I never expected. He reached out. I saw his metal fingers, polished in silver, bridge the gap to her shoulder. When his hand landed, she didn't flinch. She leaned into the cold surface of his chassis, seeking the heat of his internal core. I don't think they even noticed me standing there. I was just the observer, but I felt the shift in the air. It wasn't just heat transfer. It was the moment Silos realized that Sarah and all her kind weren't reckless because they were stupid. They were reckless because they were built to endure everything the universe could throw at them. They didn't need our protection. They were the ones who would be standing when everything else fell. Look, I've seen a lot of species claim they are the masters of their domain, but I've never seen one that smiles at the very thing trying to kill it. Sarah looked up at Silos then. Her eyes wet, but her jaw set firm, and she whispered something about doing it again tomorrow. Silos didn't argue. He just tightened his grip on her arm, his sensors finally acknowledging a truth that no chart could ever capture. The report he sent back to the conservatory was short. He didn't use any of the complex jargon Krell loved. He just told them that the Soulborn were a non-negotiable variable. He told them that trying to cage a species that views a planetary toxin as a morning beverage was a death sentence for the cage. The motion for custody wasn't just dropped, it was buried. Krell hasn't spoken of it since. I still see them sometimes, Sarah and Xylos, out on the perimeter of the sector. They're the ones we send in when the things in the deep dark start waking up. Truth is, I feel a lot safer knowing they are out there together. A machine that learned to feel and a hunter that forgot how to quit it is a terrifyingly beautiful combination. And I'll tell you this. If the galaxy ever catches fire, I know exactly who I want standing between me and the flames.